As a freshman in high school, my older brother decided that he wanted to wrestle, despite having no experience with the sport before. I was around 8 years old at the time, in third grade, and when he came home and told my mom that he needed to buy wrestling shoes, I was just totally confused about what he was talking about. I had just never heard of wrestling as a sport. For me, it was just something that I did at home with my brothers that we got in trouble for. I had absolutely zero idea that there was an actual sanctioned sport called wrestling. Then he starts getting into it, and I remember going with my mom to pick him up from practice. And he would get in the car, like, out of breath, like, soaked through, sweaty, smelling terrible, and just, like, generally just, like, battered up. And I was like, dude, like, what are you doing in there? That's what I was thinking as a youngster. And then, not to mention when the actual matches would start, and, you just watch these two guys in, like, the singlet, which is, I didn't know that's what it was at the time, but I just see them basically in underwear, like in the most revealing outfit, and, it's these muscular kids, and they're just going out and facing a single other kid that, like, is in their exact same weight class, so I mean it's like the exact same size as them, and these guys just go to war with each other, and I didn't know what the point system was, and it really confused me, but I would just watch them, pick each other up, throw each other. I was just looking at these guys and I was thinking, this is what tough looks like. This whole thing was like mesmerizing to me. Not that I was like inspired, mostly I was like scared. I was thinking, like, oh my gosh, like this is so tough. Like I would never be brave enough to do this. I knew how hard they worked in practice. I knew how exhausted my older brother was every time he would come home. I was just kind of intimidated and frightened by the whole thing. Like, these guys are cool, but I will never be like this. Because I still had some like baby fat, just like a little kid. I didn't play any sports at all. But here were these chiseled high schoolers, these teenagers, which to me looked like grown men, going out there, putting themselves on the line, and like, to me looked like fighting to the death. I mean, that's what the stakes were like to me. And especially when my older brother would go out, I was so nervous because, I wanted to see him win. And it's such a personal thing. But again, I didn't understand the point system at all. So, I mean, a lot of times these matches would end and I would have, like, no idea who won. I was, I was, like, still cheering. And then the ref goes and raises the other guy's hand, like, to say that he's the winner. And I was thinking, what? Like, I thought my older brother won. So, fast forward through the rest of elementary school and middle school, and I still never really played any sports. I was never considered myself an athletic kid. And I always felt a little insecure about that. Like, I was funny and I had friends, but I was always the guy that couldn't really keep up with soccer or just didn't try to either. Like, I didn't have an interest with it. Because, again, I felt kind of intimidated by those things. But I get to the end of middle school, and 8th grade was a year for me that was like the first year where I really felt like I started to find myself. I started to have some success talking to a couple girls, and I started to feel like I was finding my own kind of swags, my own kind of humor in the middle school culture, so I was feeling kind of like a big fish. I was feeling myself. And so I'm going into 9th grade now, high school, and I'm thinking, like, you know what, I'm going to follow in my older brother's footsteps, and I'm going to try out this wrestling thing. Like, might as well, because I remember my older brother did it without having any experience before, so, surely I can do it too. We're built kind of the same. I've always been relatively strong, even though I didn't partake in sports. Like, I've always been able to crank out some push-ups, and I was thinking, I think I can do this, and I think it would be cool because, I know it's going to be hard. My older brother told me it was going to be hard, and I knew from watching him go through it that it was hard. But I was like, whatever. It'll be hard, but it'll be cool. I'm gonna get tough. Well, I quickly realized there's a difference between knowing something and really understanding it. Because I knew it was going to be hard. I didn't really understand what that felt like. Okay? At no point in my life had I been under such physically exhausting conditions as I was placed in immediately within the first couple of days of wrestling practice. Keep in mind, I also went to a different high school than my older brother, so our practices and our experiences varied a little bit. And he was already well out of high school and in the Army at this point. But the bottom line is that I jumped into wrestling and was immediately overwhelmed with the amount of work and time that went into every practice, and just physical exhaustion, and the knowledge of knowing the moves and stuff. I was completely new to it, so I felt like these older guys that I was practicing with were, I felt like a nuisance to them because they had to take the time and show me some of this stuff, and I was slowing them down, and I was messing stuff up, and I was just really intimidated, overwhelmed, scared. I wanted to quit, but at the same time, quitting never really truly crossed my mind as an option. When I say I wanted to quit, I just mean, especially within those first couple days, it was all that newness of it. Being the new guy really was overwhelming, and I had a small team as well, so I was one of the few new guys. So I was just jumping right into it with the big dogs, getting thrown to the wolves. I just was not ready for it. So what I mean is by that I wanted to quit is just that it was just so hard that I wanted to quit. But I don't think I really ever considered quitting. I was just like, oh my gosh, I would get to the end of a practice and I would think, I don't know how I'm going to do this again tomorrow. Truly, I don't know how I'm going to do this again. But I just kept showing up, and I would tell you that every day it got a little easier. But frankly, that first season, it really didn't. Every day was painful. My cardio got a little better, I think, but I never fully developed it that first season. And so every day I was struggling to keep up with, running. We only ran a few laps to warm up, around the school hallways, but I could hardly even do that, Well, I learned to pace myself a little, but I was out of breath just doing that. Then we'd get into the room, and just the amount of time you're in a wrestling practice, it was 2 hours on the mat, not to mention an hour before that of, whether we were doing some conditioning that day, the running and weightlifting if we were in the weight room. But altogether, each practice was 3 hours every weekday after school. Some weekends too, if we didn't have a tournament or something. So it was just the knowing how much you had ahead of you every day, or how much I had ahead of me every day, was soul crushing. On top of the fact that the work was painful. And before practice and all day in school beforehand, I would be dreading going to practice and quite frankly afraid, because I was just anticipating all of this grueling work that was to come. But like I said, this was the first time I had ever experienced something like this, a true amount of hard work. And I kind of discovered something about myself in that time without knowing I was discovering something. What I kind of realized looking back is that I proved to myself in those days that I don't turn down a challenge. And I'm very grateful for that. If I had quit at any point in that first season of wrestling, I think it possibly might have messed up my work ethic for possibly the rest of my life, because this was the first hard thing I was faced with. And if you turn down the first hard thing you're faced with, that just sets a bad pattern. So even though I was frankly afraid of this work ahead of me and this task that I had signed myself up for, this beast that was my first high school wrestling season, I decided, I don't know if I really knew I was making this decision, but I decided that I could not let this break me. As much as I hated it, as much as I dreaded it, wrestling suddenly felt like the only real thing in my life. Freshman year was sucking so far. It had been a complete change from 8th grade, where I was having a blast. It seemed like kind of everyone I had known from middle school suddenly did a 180 flip over the summer and had formed into their cliques and stuff, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to going into high school. I had my two best buddies that are still my two best buddies to this day, but one of them went to a different high school, and the other one I don't even think I had a single class with. So in a lot of ways I felt like I was on my own, and I was just having this wrestling stuff thrown at me. I kind of felt like, as much as I hated wrestling, I was like, if I can't do this, if I give up, then I have nothing. And I'm not saying that to be dramatic. That's just what my stakes were at the moment. I didn't have anything else going for me at the time. And I really, it was really a hard time in my life. Like the first ever hard time in my life. Well, I don't want to say it was the first hard time in my life, but it was by far the hardest point in my life up to this moment. So I get through my first couple weeks of practice, and I start having my first couple of actual matches. Once a month, I think it was, the JV guys on our team would go to these mini tournaments almost. They were called JV rodeos, and we would each get 3 matches, I think it was, most of the time. And they would just last like 3 hours in the evening. And so that's where I had my first couple matches. I lost my first match. I think I lost my second and third match too. So I'm pretty sure I lost every match at that first JV rodeo. And it was funny too. My first ever wrestling match was against another kid from my school. I guess they just kind of didn't have enough people in my weight class at the time. So, yeah, it was me and this other guy from my school who was a grade above me. He was a sophomore, but it was also his first year of wrestling. Yeah, he kind of whooped me, even though we were both only like a week into it. He just had the aggression. I mean, obviously the technique wasn't really there because we were only a couple weeks in. But he had the aggression. Funny thing is, though, is that only a few days later, he quit. And I remember he was talking about it, at the end of one week. I think it was on a Friday. He was like telling some of his friends on the team, like, I'm not going to be here on Monday. And everyone was kind of like, yo, what, why? You're actually kind of decent. Like, you have some promising ability. And he was like, nope, I already talked to my parents about it. I'm quitting. I'm a quitter. And I remember he said that. Like, he was jokingly saying it, but he was like, yeah, I'm a quitter. I'm quitting. And here you have this guy who really had some potential. I mean, he really was not a bad wrestler for only being into it for 2-3 weeks. He just up and quit, and he was gone, and I never really talked to him again, but I still remember him because I had my first match against him, and he beat me. But that just kind of shocked me, because it was like, I realized, like, the people that are gonna succeed at this sport we're doing, wrestling, and I don't know, maybe just in general, are not always going to be the guys that are just like naturally good. It's going to be the guys that just decide they want to keep going and that like refuse to give in when it gets challenging. So that was a shock to me, but it also kind of was inspiring because I was like, really? Like, you just beat me. You're better than me, but I'm kind of tougher than you in a way. Like, I'm still coming to practice on Monday, and you're not, and you're giving in. This is your breaking point. Like, although I was feeling broken and I was feeling like this was so hard, I realized I'm not this guy. I'm not ready to break like this guy did. I might be almost there. I might be halfway there, but I'm not there like he is. And then I believe it was at the next JV rodeo where I ended up having my first win ever in wrestling. And I was so proud. I mean, I think I pinned the guy. And I was like so ecstatic. I jumped off the mat when it was over. Like, went up to the manager on our team. I was like, "Did you get that one? Did you get that one?" Because I was so used to her writing down like the scores and always writing down like a loss for me. And it's funny looking back because I realize now that like it was not a skill thing. Like, the other guy just happened to be worse than I was. Like, we were both brand new, and he just happened to be a little bit worse than me. And I remember around this time too, we had our first tournament as a team, like varsity tournament. And the way it worked at my school was like everyone would go to the varsity tournament because we just had such a small team that, we only had enough guys for one varsity team, and then all the JV guys were just basically waiting to fill in. So we went to this tournament. It was a dual meet tournament. And I guess like about after we had wrestled like probably like 4 or 5 of the schools, the varsity guy in my weight class, he decided, I don't know if he was just exhausted or he hurt himself or something, but I think his back was hurt or something, and he decided that he wanted to sub me in. So coach was like, you're up. You're having your first varsity match. And I was like, yeah, so nervous. But also kind of amped because I had just been sitting around for like a day and a half at this tournament, like on edge. And I guess all this kind of waiting around really got into my head. I guess I just spent a lot of time thinking about what I was going to do if I got into this varsity match. And so I actually did something, I don't know if it was just dumb luck or what, but I actually ended up doing something kind of cool. I finally got into this varsity match, and right off the whistle, I like shoot in on this guy for a double leg. And I know if you don't know wrestling, you don't know what that means, but basically, you get down low and, like, if these are his legs, pick him up and take the guy down. It's a double leg takedown. I just shot for it right off the whistle. I was so amped up. And it worked. Like, I executed this, like, what I remember, this is just how I remember it, but I remember it being, like, a beautiful, perfect form double leg takedown. And, my whole team just erupts, like, cheering, because as a new guy, they were all anticipating I was going to go out there and just get smoked. Of course, the triumph was short-lived, because as soon as I took this guy to the mat, he got a reversal, got back on top of me in control, and, like, put me in a headlock and pinned me, like immediately. But the fact that I had taken him down, man, I was on cloud 9, because I didn't feel totally defeated by that match, because I knew, oh, that's a varsity guy that I just wrestled. Like, I knew he was going to beat me, but man, the fact that I took him down, I'm almost there. And after that match, I went back to the bench, shook my coach's hands. They were proud of me. And I went back to the bench, and one of the upperclassmen on the team came up to me. And I was, kind of frankly terrified of this guy, because he was he wasn't the heavyweight, but he was right below. I think he was like the 215 pounder on our team. And he was like this big dude, looked like a grown man to me, because, I was 14 and he was, I don't know, 16 or 17. And he had never really spoken to me before, because again, I was still like the new guy on the team. And he came up to me after that match, and he gave me a fist bump, and he was like, hey, good job. And I was like, trying to play it cool. I was like, hey, thanks, man. But I was like, dang, I felt like I had gained the respect of the actual wrestlers on the team, the real varsity guys. And, if I was on cloud 9 before that, I was on cloud 11 after that fist bump. Another big aspect for me at the time of this first wrestling season was that it was the first period in my life where I really had to think about my eating habits and change them. I was pretty much only eating health, or what I thought was healthy stuff at the time, like trying to eat more protein. I remember I stopped eating like snacks throughout the day, stopped doing dessert. So my diet at the time, I don't know where I got this idea, but I guess it worked, was I just only ate meals. Like, I would only eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and nothing in between. I was in the 113-pound weight class, and it wasn't really that hard for me to get to that weight, because I didn't have that much muscle at the time. I didn't have as much as I would in later seasons, but this was definitely the first time in my life where I had to kind of cut out some of the carbs, cut out the snacks, and that was another really difficult aspect of it. Anyway, I get to kind of that 2/3 mark in the season, I think it was. Maybe it was somewhere at the end of December, beginning of January, or something like that, and the varsity 113 guy on my team, like, went on like a 1-week vacation, I think, in the middle of the season, which is actually like unheard of for wrestlers, as far as I know. Like, you don't leave in the middle of the wrestling season. Like, in wrestling season, all you think about is wrestling. And while he was gone, I stepped up and filled in for him at the couple matches we had during that week. And I think it was during that period that I got my first varsity win. It was well earned. It was the most exhausting, probably to this day, match I've ever had. Like, it was one of those times where you're pretty much evenly matched with the other guy. Like, this other guy, it must have also been his first season, because it seemed like we had the same amount of skill, same amount of endurance. And it was one of those matches where we were really going point for point. It was like, it wasn't much skill on the mat. We were just like taking each other down, getting up, taking each other down. But like, it was exhausting by the end of this thing. And I remember being on the mat and like knowing what I had to do, but at the same time, the idea of doing it was like the most painful, most terrible idea that ever could have struck me. And unless you've been like truly physically drained, you wouldn't understand. Like I didn't want to get up, I didn't want to move, I didn't want to keep going, just wanted this thing to be over. And that's how a lot of matches felt at this time, because my endurance was terrible. But this was one where I ended up just having slightly more will than the guy I was wrestling, and somehow, I don't remember, I think it was just a points match, I don't think I pinned him, but I ended up beating the guy, and that was a triumph for me. Like, I was ecstatic about it, because it was a varsity match, and I wasn't thinking about the fact that the other guy probably wasn't a real varsity guy either, because he wasn't that good. But at the time, all I knew was that it was a varsity match. That was a varsity guy I had just beat. I was ecstatic. And then the guy who I had been filling in for on my team, the varsity guy, comes back from his vacation, and we had wrestle-offs that week, which, if you're not a wrestler, wrestle-offs is matches you have amongst your own teammates that are in the same weight class to see who's going to be the varsity guy. So like, for example, on a team, if you have multiple guys in one weight class, they all wrestle each other, and whoever wins is the varsity wrestler. And the great thing about wrestling is that it's not just the first day of the season where you have like one tryout, like basketball or whatever other sport, where whoever makes the tryout that first time stays on the team for the rest of the season. In wrestling, you have wrestle-offs like every other week. So nobody gets cut at the beginning of the season except the guys that quit themselves. But if you want to be on varsity, you have to continually prove yourself as the best one for the job. So it's kind of a beautiful system in that it ensures that people stay sharp and stay on their best game. And so me and this other guy wrestle off, and I don't know if he just, got out of shape while he was away, or if he got in his head about missing practice, but somehow during our wrestle off, I get him into a cradle, which again, if you're not a wrestler, it's basically just a way to pin somebody, but kind of a hard thing to do, relatively difficult thing to do. Somehow I got him into a cradle. Somehow I had also learned that throughout this prior wrestling season. So I got him into a cradle, and he just kind of gave up on the mat, and I pinned him. I remember my head coach at the time, blew the whistle, tapped the mat to signify that I pinned him, that the match was over, and he was shaking his head. I remember he's like, well, like, that's that. Like, not mad at me that I pinned him, but more like surprised and frustrated at his varsity wrestler for losing so easily. And I felt great in that moment. Like, oh my gosh, I had just beat the guy who on day one was so much better than me, and in my mind was the voice of experience. Like, this guy, I think he only had one season on me. Like, he was a sophomore, I was a freshman. But to me, that was all the difference. Like, this guy was seasoned, this guy was experienced, and yet here I was, and I had surpassed him. So what this means now is that I'm the new varsity wrestler for the 113 position. And again, this was kind of a lesson in will and determination and grit, because that guy that I beat quit like immediately after I beat him. I think his spirit was just broken. Again, I was kind of learning what kind of a person I was, and that I was kind of stronger willed than a lot of these other guys that give up at their kind of darkest hour. But then the second thought is, oh crap, now it's going to be me going out there every time. At this point in the season, I was starting to feel more appreciated by my teammates, because I remember winning that wrestle off, and a lot of them were kind of quietly cheering and like dapping me up and shaking my hand, like excited that I was gonna be their varsity guy. I guess I don't know what it was, if they saw my work ethic or what, but they kind of all decided like it was me they wanted in the 113 position, not the other guy, and that was just like that. Obviously, made me feel amazing. So then the pressure kind of picks up because I'm no longer just the JV guy who everyone knows is brand new and expects to lose every time. Now I'm the varsity guy, the only 113, and I'm basically held to the same standard as everyone else on the team, the varsity guys. And this was toward the end of the season, so there wasn't a ton of matches left, but there was still a good handful of varsity matches, and I was wrestling at all of them, and I was losing pretty much all of them. I think the only varsity match I won that year was that one that I had mentioned earlier. It's not like I, excelled in skill and got a lot better during the season. The big lesson was just grit. But anyway, as these matches are coming at me, and I'm going out there and basically just getting crushed, I'm getting more and more anxiety about going out to wrestle. And I'm not generally an anxious guy, but keep in mind, these are like the highest stakes possible to me at the time. Like, I'm going out there during a varsity match with most of the time my family watching, my parents watching, and it's just me and one other guy who most likely has way more experience than me because it's a varsity match, and I'm not really supposed to be out there. And I basically know I'm most likely going to lose. And yet I'm still not giving into that thought in my head. I'm still trying to think of how can I win? What kind of moves am I going to do? And I'm thinking about this all day before these matches happen, and I'm just getting I would get genuinely scared before I would go out there. Like really, my heart would race. I mean, it was beyond nerves. It was I guess it was just a really intense anxiety, but to me it felt just like fear. And I hated that. I'm the type of guy, I hate to be afraid of things. I like to just get them out of the way, conquer them, and stop being afraid of them. But this, for some reason, didn't get easier every time. It actually felt like it was getting worse. Like every time before my matches, I would get more scared somehow. And then pair that with the fact that I'm still going to these grueling practices that really don't get easier because my endurance, for whatever reason, wasn't improving that much throughout this season. I'm still struggling with these practices. So just about every day of my week, 6 out of 7 days, I would have either a terribly challenging practice that would go on for 3 hours, which felt like an eternity to me, or I would have a match or matches where I would just be so afraid and I would go out and lose. So it was like a double-edged sword, and again, it was like I'm being, so much pressure is being placed on me, or at least this is how it felt to me. And again, I just had this feeling like I was being placed in a trash compactor. Felt like I was taking fire from all sides. And I mean, it might sound dramatic to you, but at the time, as a 14-year-old who's never experienced really any significant adversity, this was huge for me. Again, I wanted it to be over. I wanted to, not to quit, but I wanted it to be over. But I was not going to. And I think knowing that I was not going to quit almost made it worse because I was like, oh my gosh, I have so much more of this to endure. I mean, all the while, I'm also hungry and skinny and only eating, protein or what I thought was a healthy diet. So it was challenging on many levels, and also during this time I'm not seeing my friends very often. Just a generally lonely experience. Then we get to a point in the season, it's pretty much the end of the season. We finish all our normal matches, all our normal tournaments, and you think the season's over there, but it's actually really not, because that's when the postseason begins, and we still have practice every day now because there's no matches to break up the practices. It's just practice every weekday, and that postseason goes on from, I think, the end of January, middle of February, into like basically right up until March, which is when like I think counties start and regionals and states and stuff begin. And at that point, basically most of the team is gone. Like all the other JV guys stopped wrestling a while ago because all the JV events are over, and the only things left to train for are the things that are really just meant for the varsity guys that are going to counties and regionals and states. But I was still going because my coach had asked me to be a partner for some of the lighter guys that still needed to train for these upcoming events. Of course, this was all crushing to me because now I really had no reason to be there. I had already done what I had set out to do to survive like a single wrestling season. But now it was almost more important to me than ever to not quit because I was like, wow, I've made it this far. There's no way I'm going to quit now. But at the same time, there's nothing I want more than to just be done. Like, it was only a couple weeks left or whatever. I only had a couple more weeks of practice ahead of me, but that did not matter. If you've ever been to a wrestling practice, a couple weeks, I mean, especially if you're a new guy, like, that's huge. Like, this was not some easy thing for me, especially at the time. And I was crushed by this news. I really just did not want to be there. I was dreading practice, honestly, more than ever. And all around me, it just felt like pain. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, that's how it felt to me. From like 7 in the morning till 2 p.m., I had school, which was utterly lonely and boring and exhausting. And then immediately after school, I think like at 2:15, so I mean I had like 10 minutes to kind of reset myself, use the bathroom, whatever, get ready. Practice started. And that went from like 2:15 till 5. And, you know, by the time we got out, you know, it's winter, so it's dark, it's lonely, it's cold. Go home, have dinner, relax for like an hour or two, go to bed, and then do it again and again and again and again. And, I mean, the wrestling season, I think, is one of the longer sports seasons of high school. I mean, it goes from mid-November till March. And, so I'm like, 100 days into it at this point, and just sick of it. I remember sitting in health class one day at the end of the period, waiting for the bell to ring, and I was listening to a song that my dad had just showed me earlier, I think that morning in the car ride, and I was just re-listening to it. It was a Crosby, Stills, and Nash song, Our House, and one of the lyrics is something about how life used to be so hard. And I wanted so badly to be in a position where I could say, life used to be so hard. Like, I wanted it to be over. I wanted to look back and say, I did that, but it used to be so hard. Now it's easy. Now I'm living good. Now I'm happy and I'm relaxed and the stress is gone. But I wasn't there. I still had weeks. I don't know how much longer I had at this point, but I still had weeks of practice left. And even though I was this close to being over, it still felt like I had an eternity ahead of me to go. And so just hearing those lyrics, like, I remember sitting there by myself, listening through my AirPods, genuinely, like, I did not cry, but I felt my eyes start to, like, burn or whatever. And I'm not a crier, really. I mean, I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I've cried in the last 5 years, but, like, that, like, just sitting there, like, it was so emotional. Like, that stupid small moment in health class at the end of the period, waiting for the bell to ring. Like, wow, that was, like, probably my darkest moment of this period. As funny as that sounds, like, I was, like, just crushed, and there was no way out but through. Like, I knew I was just going to keep going. I was not going to quit at this point. I was just going to keep going, and knowing exactly what practice was going to look like, and exactly how many more days there were going to be, I was like, wow, this is going to suck. And there's only one way out of it. Through all that suckiness. Regardless, you get the picture. It was very challenging, so I'm not going to keep doting on that. Eventually I get to the end of the season. I finished it. And, oh my gosh, I never thought I would see the day. Just simply finishing that wrestling season was the biggest accomplishment of my life up until this point, and looking back, I'm honestly still proud of it because what I'm telling you might sound dramatic, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have wrestled before and are like, this guy is a loser, what is he talking about? It's hard, but it's not that crazy. To me, everything I just told you was exactly real, if not understated. Like, it was that painful to me. And it was finally over. And so, immediately after wrestling, I'm finally free and able to do the things that I've been longing to do. Like, eat all the cake and the dessert that I've been wanting to eat and all the carbs that I had to cut out for so long. And I was able to just go home at the end of the school day at 2 p.m. with the rest of my peers who just do nothing every day like I'd been longing to do for so long. And I could just go home, and I was finally allowed to just go home, sit on my bed, and twiddle my thumbs like I'd been wanting to do for so long. And I'm doing it, and I hate it. I mean, maybe there was a few days right after the season ended where I enjoyed doing that stuff and having nothing to do, but like almost immediately I found myself immensely lost. I think it tore me up so much because I had exactly what I'd been longing for, and yet it did not scratch the itch. I was still feeling, I suddenly felt useless. I mean, for so many months before this, my one purpose had been to wrestle and frankly to survive wrestling, and I had done that, and now I was purposeless. And so I went into a rough couple of months with that, which honestly probably carried me up right until the end of my freshman school year, where I was just kind of lost. I would try to work on music here and there in my free time, but I never would really sit down with it enough to get a satisfying amount of it done. For a little while in the interim, I played like tennis at my school, which also kept me busy, but it was really just another distraction. And when that was over, again, I was so lonely and without an idea of what I was supposed to be doing. I felt lazy and stagnant, and it was during this time too where I started to not like get into bad things, but I was trying to get into bad things, like some nothing crazy, but just things that kind of did not align with who I really was, and things that ended up upsetting my friends for a good while. Like my only two friends, I managed to disappoint them, upset them, so it actually separated me more from them and made me more lonely, and now guilty as well. And so I really did not have anything going for me at the time, or at least that's how it felt. And so I called my older brother, the one who had been my inspiration to wrestle in the first place, who I just kind of look up to in all things, my whole life. And I told him my situation and some of the kind of things I've been struggling with. And he was like, I see. And he told me my issue was that I had been trying to solve my problems with artificial solutions. I don't remember what his words were exactly, but things that weren't really gonna fix them, just like temporary solutions. I think maybe it was the word, like band-aids, instead of confronting them head on and finding some purpose. And he also told me I should just start working out when I got home from school. And he sent me this calisthenics workout circuit that he had created at the time as a sergeant in the Army, which is what he was at the time. And he sent it to me and said, well, this is what I've been doing recently. Try this. Do it right when you get home from school. Don't even sit down on your bed, because if you do, you won't get it done. And it's my older brother, who, as I said, I look up to. So I did exactly what he said. And I remember those first couple of days where I was doing this workout, I would be on the bus ride home and nodding off for the couple minutes I had. And when it would finally pull up to my stop, I would be fighting the grogginess, trying to get my eyes open and thinking about this workout I had ahead of me, and I was like, no way I can do this, I'm just so exhausted. But I would drag myself into the basement where I had some space, and I would get this calisthenics workout done, and it immediately made a huge difference because I had an accomplishment, and I felt really good after I did it. I would do it, take a shower, and it was I was completely brought back to life. I was rejuvenated. And like wrestling practice, it stayed difficult for a while. But one thing he had told me when giving me the advice of how to do it was that I just needed to get through the first 14 days. He said if I could do this workout for 14 days, then I would create the habit in my head and it would no longer be hard and I would just be able to do it without really thinking about it. And I didn't really believe him, but I pushed myself through those first 2 weeks and I got to like day 14 and I swear, I mean, it pretty much was exactly as he said. It just suddenly was like something I could do. I mean, it was still semi hard to get myself down there, but I was just used to it at that point. It's just what I did. And every day it helped me clear my mind of all that kind of muck that I tend to collect when just going throughout my day without accomplishment, without purpose. And as soon as basically that basic workout became easy, I started to think about what's next. And again, wrestling entered my mind, and I was remembering how painful and challenging it had been, and that had all basically stemmed from the fact that my endurance had sucked that first season. And I really didn't want to do it, but I knew the answer would be to start running to increase my endurance. And so I talked to him about that, and he said, yeah, just start off with a 2-mile run. And I was like, man, I really don't want to run. I really don't even want to wrestle. But at the same time, I want to see what I can do as a wrestler if I just have a better endurance. So I was like talking to my older brother. I was like, okay, 2-mile run, but first off, I don't even think I can do 2 miles. And he said, you can. Just go in with a slow pace, and you can definitely do 2 miles. I know you can. And I said, but I don't even have any place to run. Remember, I was 14 or 15 at this point, so I still didn't have a car. And he said, just do laps in the backyard. We have field in our backyard. And he actually went on Google Earth and did the math, did the calculation, and found out that each lap around our field was 0.2 miles. So he said, you do 5 laps, that's 1 mile. So do 10 laps around that field, and you will do 2 miles. So I set out, honestly not really thinking I would even be able to run the 10 laps around the field. I really didn't think I could do 2 miles. But I set out at that really slow pace like he had suggested, and I surprised myself. I did it, and it really wasn't even that hard either, because I had really paced myself. And so I called my brother, and I said, alright, what's next? And he said, try 3 miles now. And so I did it, 3 miles. Really never thought I would be able to run 3 miles, because 3 miles to me at the time was like, that's like a real runner's distance. And one thing I had always thought about myself was that I'm not a runner. I was always a little insecure about that. I was like, I knew I couldn't run. But when I had ran 3 miles, I was really amped up. I was like, oh, wow, maybe I am a runner. Maybe it's just something I got to work on a little bit. I want to see how far I can take this. So incrementally, I kept increasing it slowly. Like I would do a couple 3-mile runs, then I would work my way up to 4. And when I hit 5 miles, that was a huge mark for me. I was really stoked about that because, again, that was like a big distance. That's what real runners run. And by the end of this summer, I had really gotten into a regimen of running. I went from doing, I think, 2 runs a week is what I started off with, to running every other day. And every other day I would do a 10-mile run by the end of the summer. I would wake up at 7, and just like I had been with wrestling practices before, I would really dread these runs because they took so long to do, because I still never really increased my pace. I was doing basically 10-minute miles for this whole thing. So I would be out there for 100 minutes, which is, an hour and 40 minutes. It was like longer than a short movie. And I also, most of the time, wouldn't be listening to anything like music or anything. I would just be out there with my thoughts. So I was really doing it on hard mode. And, man, I was just pushing myself. And I really didn't want to be out there. But again, I, for some reason, created in my mind, like, the idea that I just had to. I had to be out there. If I stopped running, my endurance was going to fade. And still, I really hadn't had any proof that what I had been doing was even going to fix anything, was even going to make me a better wrestler. So I just had the idea, like, there's no time to slow down. I just got to be better, just got to be better. So I kept doing it. So I kept doing these runs right up until the end of that summer and into the next school year, my sophomore year, and right up until that next wrestling season. At this point, I was feeling very proud of how far I had come with running, and 10-mile distance was something I never in my whole life thought I would be able to achieve. And the fact that I was consistently able to stick to the discipline of running every other day and stick to my schedule without failure, even on vacations and stuff over the summer, I was very proud of that. Although I still didn't fully trust myself, I still felt like every day was a battle, and at any given moment I might quit. And as I'm getting closer to this second season now, the start of this second season, I attend a couple of wrestling practices outside of my school, just with a couple of my teammates, but outside of the school. And also, I had a new coach this second season who was just starting out, and he was coaching just small groups of us that were particularly dedicated outside of the season to get warmed up. And only then did I really remember, just how grueling wrestling practices were. And once again, I started to get into my own head about attending these practices. Like when I wasn't at practice, I was kind of, my mind was kind of consumed by thinking about them and how much I didn't want to go, and I was just thinking about how much I dreaded going. It actually got to a point where I decided I wasn't going to wrestle, because I made the decision in my head. I was like, I've come so far with working out on my own and having my own kind of fitness routine, and I was like, you know what? I'm glad that I learned this kind of discipline from wrestling last year, but I don't think I need wrestling anymore. I can do this on my own. I've proven that to myself over the summer, and I don't think I'm going to wrestle. I don't need it. It's too much of a toll on my mental well-being, and I'm just going to work out on my own and still be happy with that achievement. So I texted my coach, I'm not going to wrestle for those reasons, and a couple weeks go by, and I just start to feel like heavy FOMO, because I'm thinking about, well, what would have happened? Would my running have made a big difference to my wrestling ability? And so kind of at the last minute, right before the season starts, I decide, you know what, I'm going to wrestle just for one more season, just to see what I can do. I want to see what kind of a wrestler I am if I had a good endurance. So I do that, and I was kind of half hesitant thinking, did I just sign myself up for a whole nother season of pain and I'm not even going to be any better? That was a serious consideration on my mind, because I hadn't really put that much work into wrestling other than the running. I hadn't put that much work into the actual technique. But I was like, whatever, I'm just going to see what this running makes a difference to. And let's just say the difference was tremendous. Immediately in this season, I go off with a bang. I didn't lose like my first, I think, 8 or 9 matches, and they were all pins. I was pinning guys left and right. Guys that I really shouldn't have been pinning too at some points. Like I was doing stupid stuff out there, but I was just outlasting guys. My endurance was great. Like I didn't have the technique that much there, but I would just truly outlast these guys on the mat and have energy to spare. The running, even though I only did low and slow running, really slow cadence, like 10-minute miles, but I would go for these great distances, my heart and my lungs had really developed a huge capacity for, exertion, for work. So I really had a good sophomore season. Wrestling practices were still hard and challenging, but they were also a lot easier than they had been that first year, because I had this endurance, and also because I had this sense of accomplishment now of my wins. It gave me some momentum to continue to work hard in practice and to continue to want to wrestle and to want to be there, versus my first year when I was just losing left and right, and I really had no motivation to be there other than just sheer will. So I was actually getting some momentum this second year, and I definitely had even more respect from my team, because now I was someone that was really putting out. I wasn't just a hard worker, I was really someone that was providing for the team. And they started to even see me, my teammates even started to see me as someone who was like a guaranteed win at some points. And of course, I wasn't always able to be that, but a vast majority of the time, my second season, that was the case. I don't have my records. I was never really a guy that kept track of his record, his scores, but I would say I won at least 3/4 of my matches that season. And I think they were all pins except my final match, which was at some point in January. It was at a tournament where I think we were like 6 matches into this tournament. It was a dual meet. And I had won every one of my matches until this last, I think, 6th or 5th, somewhere in there, match, where my opponent dropped me on my shoulder in a mat return, and I didn't have a free hand to put my hand out on the mat and brace my fall. Dropped me on my shoulder, and immediately I kind of felt like something, like, not really pop, but I was like, ugh, that didn't feel right. And I kept wrestling, and I just felt like my arm was kind of weak, and I didn't really feel like it was hurting until probably like 30 seconds later. But I finished the match, and I actually regained control of the guy, did a reversal. I don't remember exactly how the match went, but I was dominating the guy, and I was on top of him, and I was trying to turn him for a pin, but I was trying to use my arm for a half Nelson or whatever to control him, and my left arm, and I just couldn't really get the strength, and it was hurting. I was like, I can't do this. So I ended up just riding him out until the third period was over, and I ended up winning by points. And I'm fairly sure that was the only match that season that I won by points instead of a pin. Not to say that I didn't lose a handful as well, but I think that was the only one where I won not by a pin. Just something I think is personally a cool achievement. But yeah, I finished that match, and I get up and I immediately go over to my kind of corner, my coaches and my family, and I'm like, yeah, my shoulder hurts pretty bad. And as soon as this match was over, like, I guess the adrenaline kind of wore off, and I was like, oh man, I can even barely like pick up my own arm. Like, dang, this is actually starting to hurt pretty bad. Like, my sensations were kind of starting to come back to me. And so I went over to the physical trainers they have on staff, and they thought I had dislocated my like AC joint in my shoulder. Got some X-rays and whatnot, and it turns out that is what it was after a couple different opinions. And so I was out for the rest of that season. Yeah, I was a little bummed because I felt like I wasn't doing my kind of duty to my team, and I felt like I was kind of taking the easy way out. Part of me was also excited because I think truly at my heart I still wasn't really a wrestler. I was just a guy that was kind of forcing myself through the challenges of wrestling to see if I could survive. So part of me was also glad to be done with the season because it is really challenging work, and all of a sudden I could eat what I wanted again and that kind of thing, so it was a bit of a relief. It was a lot of mixed emotions though, again, because then I couldn't work out for a while because of my shoulder. I couldn't even really run because I couldn't swing my arm. And so that was another challenge because I felt a little useless in terms of that. But for the most part, I was feeling still pretty good in this period because I had really just impressed myself. Again, this might sound a bit dramatic, but during that period where I was really dominating and winning a vast majority of my matches, I started to develop this thing where I was no longer scared going into my matches at all. I would get nervous, but I would be very almost excited as well. It's like almost like a peaceful type of nervousness, type of anticipation. And it got to the point where like one of my favorite coaches even said to me at one point, like before our match, like, all right, go meditate or whatever it is you do to get ready. And he was kind of right. I would just do my warm-ups, but in my head I was feeling relaxed in a way. I realized the only way around that fear is to have enough experience that you actually believe that you have a good chance of winning, if that makes any sense. You just genuinely have to put in the work to get to a point where you believe in yourself enough. And that's a hard thing to do, but that's just what it took. All that work and running I had done boosted my endurance. I also, of course, did gain some technical skill with how to wrestle, but it was all very basic stuff. It was mostly just that grit and amount of energy I had that allowed me to just outlast most guys. And not only did I have this shift in kind of how I got ready for my matches, I also started to feel like a real asset to my team. They all counted on me to win, and they all expected me to win, and they a lot of times had more confidence in me than I did. Like, I would have guys patting me on the back being like, I already know you're gonna win, and I would be like, dang, like, no pressure, man, right? While that was kind of a lot of pressure, it was also amazing to have that much trust and faith in me, and for guys to see me as such an asset and bringing so much value to the team. And I was also starting to become a bit of a leader on the team because I had wrestled a season before, and I'm naturally kind of a guy that speaks out and kind of helps the younger guys because I know how challenging the sport is. And as my kind of team was really appreciating me and I was winning consistently, my self-perception really changed in a way that it never had before. I had always thought myself as like nice guy, funny guy, but now I had this side of myself that was like, truly, this is gonna sound so corny, but I was seeing myself like a warrior in my mind. I felt like I go out there and I win, and I'm able to, and I'm consistently able to be better than other guys that are of a decent caliber. Like, I mean, I wasn't, the best wrestler out there, and still skilled wrestlers were beating me a little bit, but for the most part, I felt like, what is this side of me? This kind of, not aggressive, but almost like deadly in terms of wrestling, of course. This almost lethal side of me. And that felt good, like very powerful. I just felt more confident. I never felt that way before. I've always been a creative guy, but to have this kind of physical ability, it was really empowering to me. But anyway, there was a bit of a darker side too to this season, which is that by this point I had put on a little bit more muscle, and so getting back to that 113 pound weight class had been a bit more of a challenge. And I had to think more seriously about what I was eating. And now I didn't just cut out like most of the carbs and stuff. Like, I really, really dieted hard and ate like damn near nothing but protein bars and like chicken, and like that was like a really strict diet, and like it all kind of tied into the running and stuff from over the summer. Like I didn't even like make any exceptions pretty much. From like a couple weeks before wrestling throughout the season, I really went hard into the dieting and got really thin for this to fit into this weight class. And I first noticed a bit of an issue with it over Christmas break of that season, which was still before I ended up hurting myself, like a week or two. In my county where I go to high school, after Christmas break, every wrestling weight class gets an extra 2 pounds that they're allowed to have. So for me, 113 was going to go up to 115. And Christmas break's also like a week long, or like almost 2 weeks actually. So I knew this was a bit of opportunity for me to enjoy myself with food a little bit, because I would have 2 more pounds at the end of it. And also I had like 2 weeks to kind of slow myself down at the end and get back into that range. But what I was not anticipating was how I was not going to be able to control myself. And I was truly eating like disgusting amounts of food. Like so much so to the point where I would feel like genuinely sick. Way too much food. And I was also like thinking about, did I get enough protein? I ate a bunch of cake. So then I would go back for like chicken and stuff, and all the, it would just feel disgusting. It was just the first time in months that I was really allowing myself to enjoy these things. But the issue was that I would eat and enjoy myself, and then I would be full, and I was like, and just almost be like sad that it was over, because I had been looking forward to it for so long. I had been absent of it for so long. I couldn't let it go. I would keep eating, and it wasn't even enjoyable. Like I would eat just to eat. And I developed this thing, which is, just bit of a warning. It's kind of gross, and I'm embarrassed about it. But I developed this thing where like I couldn't really hold it down. Like I would eat so much, and like small amounts of it would come back up into my mouth. And like I never outwardly like threw up, but that would happen consistently. And it got to a point where I don't know why, and I still don't know why. Like doctors and stuff never could really figure this out. Even when I ate small amounts of things, even sometimes when I just drank water, it would come back up like that, like small amounts. Yeah, like I was kind of scared about this. I really, like chemically, something in my head, I was like, I just had to eat and eat and eat. Yeah, and of course, I now realize like it was the other side of the spectrum. Like I had been so disciplined with not eating anything fun, and then as soon as I was reintroduced to all these foods, like of course I couldn't help myself. That's the kind of guy I am. I'm an all or nothing kind of guy, so it's very hard for me to kind of find balance after being so far into the realm of discipline for so long. Anyway, these kinds of weird eating habits continued for like, I don't know, probably like forever. Like I don't know if I've ever really stopped thinking about food weirdly, but Like, seriously, they went on for like, I don't know, another 8 months or something like that after the season was over. And it was weird because it was like in my head I was being healthy, because I would still like try to track my protein stuff and make sure I was getting all this like protein that I thought I needed, eating way more than I really did. And I didn't really eat that much dessert, but I just ate so much of like the dinner and like lunch type stuff that it was like still not really healthy. Like, it was more food than I needed. Yeah, it was just really hard for me to balance out. Eventually, as I kind of approached the next wrestling season for my junior year, I was starting to find a somewhat normal diet again, but still it was weird. And also by this point I had not really been running much. But something I didn't mention was that running really messed my legs up. Like my hamstrings, very tight and very uncomfortable, and I come to find now that it's kind of an issue to do with the fact that I have flat feet and the fact that my form for running was absolutely awful. Like, I didn't know that you weren't supposed to strike your heel. You're not supposed to land on your heel when you run, and I only landed on my heel. And so as I was gearing up for this next wrestling season, I was kind of in my head feeling like, for one thing, I wasn't really as prepped as I had been the year before. And I wasn't also in this like state of like extreme discipline like I had been the year before. I was just feeling like, all right, I'm gonna kind of pick up right where I left off, and yeah, I'll be good again. I also wasn't as amped for this season as I had been my sophomore year, because I had seen what I could do and I was impressed by it. But again, like, wrestling really wasn't in my heart. It wasn't really something I like loved to do. It was just something I was kind of experimenting with and forcing myself to do. So I wasn't that amped about it, but I was like, this is something I've started. This is something I'm not going to quit now. Let's do another season. And so I got into this third season, and one thing I promised myself was that I definitely wasn't going to be 113 pounds again. Like, that had been just too light. I had really messed myself up for that long time where I couldn't eat right, and that was just so painful for me. All right, now I'm going to be 120 pounds, because that's the next weight class up. And I think at the time I was walking around at like 120, 128 or something, still with like a relatively balanced diet. So I was like, that's not going to be too hard. So that's what I did. I went in for the 120, but there was a bit of a hiccup, because if you remember back to my freshman year, the guy that had been in my 113 weight class, who I ended up beating and who ended up quitting off the team, and who didn't wrestle my sophomore year, his junior year, decided he wanted to come back my junior year, his senior year. And so he comes back to wrestle, and now he's saying he wants to be in the 120 spot. Well, I'm thinking, you know what? That's alright. Like, we're going to wrestle off again, and I've had a year of experience on him where he was just, off and not working. So it's going to be easy. And even if it's not, like, let the best man have the spot. But I wrestled him off, and it was really close, but I was just doing dumb stuff, and he beat me. And it wasn't really a good match for either of us. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I just remember feeling like, dang, like, I really could have got him. But I wasn't too upset about it, because I was like, you know what, early in the season, I'm going to get him next time. Wrestle him off again, like, really soon after, like the next week or something. And lost again, doing dumb stuff, but I felt like I had been a little close this time, and I was like, shoot, like, dang, I need to tighten up. Wrestled him off again, next 2 weeks later or whatever, lost again. And by this point, the actual season had like started, and we were getting into tournaments and stuff. And because I had elected to not go to 113, I had set my mind on being 120, but I had lost the 120 spot. I was just sitting on the bench for the majority of these tournaments, watching my team wrestle, and like, that went so against what I had become in my head of like a guy who puts out for his team, a guy that they count on, a guy that helps his team win. And no one else on my team was wrestling in that 113 spot, so every time we were losing points because we weren't sending someone out. And no one like was giving me a hard time for it, but at the same time everyone was kind of looking at me like, dude, like, what are you doing? You could be going out there. We know you could. Like, we've seen you do it before. Go out there. Get us some points, man. But I was sticking to my guns for a while, just swearing on being the 120 guy. I was like, I'm going to just beat this other guy that was in my spot. And so I wrestled him off again, I think. I think I wrestled him off like 5 times total. And again, I lost. And like, I swear, every time we wrestled off, it was like this close. And I mean, there was even times where I like had him on his back and he just kind of wormed out. You know, I'm not making excuses. Like, I definitely should have beat him. I just wasn't beating him. I wasn't doing the right things. I wasn't going hard enough, whatever the case may be. So yeah, that was actually pretty tough, pretty hard pill to swallow. And at this point, again, we were getting kind of into like the heart of the season, and I wasn't wrestling. And so my coaches pull me aside, and they say, you know, Christmas break's coming up, and you know, after Christmas break, you're gonna get 2 pounds, so it's gonna be 115 pounds, not 113. And on top of that, you get allowances at a lot of these meets, so maybe it'll be 116, 117, depending on different circumstances I won't go into. And they were like, how do you feel about that? And, you know, just kind of the look in their eyes of how excited they were to see me wrestle, and wanting to be someone that helps the team and an asset to the team, and wanting to, you know, win, you know, for the personal glory of it, and wanting to wrestle. I was like, okay, I'll do it. In general, I don't think I have many regrets, like genuine regrets in my life so far. I mean, I'm only a kid still, but that is one thing that I have actually come to regret. I really wish I had not agreed to go to 113 pounds. I wish I had stuck it out another week or so, or however long it took to beat this other guy in the wrestle-off. Because I left it as unfinished business. I know I should have been able to beat him. And what ended up happening to me for the rest of that season was like, I really put myself through a lot that I didn't need to. Because the way I went about dieting this time was not quite as healthy as it had been the first time. If you could even consider that first time healthy. I kind of cared less about the protein and more about just the calorie amount. So I was making sure I only ate like, I don't know, 1,600 calories a day or whatever it was, and I didn't really care what those calories were coming from, so long as I got like 80 grams of protein or whatever, which is not sufficient at that low of a weight. Like, I don't know if you realize this, but the lower weight you are, the more protein you actually need if you're trying to sustain your muscles. So I got really scrawny and really tired. Like, literally day to day I was just like fatigued, and honestly I got to a point where like I was kind of numb, like not physically but like spiritually, genuinely. I just felt always this kind of like fatigue, and like I was just kind of floating through the world. Really didn't care about wrestling anymore after a while. Really was just trying to survive day to day through practice. Yeah, that was not a good place to be, because if you're in wrestling and you're not 100% dedicated, you're wasting your time. You're going to go out there and lose, because there is going to be people that want it more than you. And that became very apparent very quickly, because I ended up going out onto the mat, and it seemed like every match I was having, I was losing by like a single point. That literally happened at least 3 times I can think of. I had a varsity match, that I lost by a single point. And that was truly crushing, because at that type of a match, you know you did not lose because of skill. You strictly lost because of a lack of will. Like, you just didn't go an ounce harder than the other guy. Like, he just wanted it that much more than you. And he wasn't that good either. Like, you should have beat that guy. You just didn't, because your heart wasn't in it. And, you know, my family was coming to these matches watching me lose, and I knew what was happening, and I was just watching myself kind of slip away, and my heart just wasn't in it, and it was really starting to show. And I got to a point where I just had no motivation to be there at all. It was interesting though, because like I said, I really was numb about this whole thing. I mean, it wasn't like in the case of my freshman year where I was like, you know, feeling like tearing up about having to go to practice. I truly was like in, you know, pain about the whole thing. I didn't want to be there and do the work. But at the same time, I had just kind of, I don't know if it's a defense mechanism or what, but I had just accepted it as what it is. I mean, school would end, and in this particular season, we didn't start practice till like 3, or I think it was 3. So I would go into the parking lot, sit in my truck, and like take a nap, and just like wait for practice to start. And man, these are some of like the worst naps of all time, because it was also like I was always on edge about practice having to start. Anyways, I was just in this weird state of like numbness where I wasn't exactly letting the dread in. Like I almost just like had this I almost just had this mindset where like I would not let the pain in. Like I didn't even acknowledge it. But I was not a good wrestler. Like I was doing really, really poorly. Disappointing myself, and like I knew I could do better, but at the same time I didn't care enough to do what it took to become better, and I also didn't have the energy. Like I was just surviving. That really sucked, especially because, I mean, a couple weeks before the end of the season, that guy who was in the 120 spot up and quit again. And this again goes back to different types of people and quitters. And I mean, no shade to that guy, he's a nice guy, but like he's just a quitter. At least in terms of wrestling. I don't know him outside of wrestling, really. But that was upsetting. I was like, dang, man, like, you kind of took up that spot. But again, that really wasn't his fault. Like, he was just doing his thing. I didn't step up and beat him. Like, that's all on me. That just kind of plays into the fact that I really should have stuck it out and tried to beat him, because, I mean, I really think I could have. I get through this season, no injuries, so I powered through. And for the first time in my, wrestling career, I went to counties, like the county tournament. And if you do well at counties, then you go to regionals and then states. And it was at this tournament I got a funny idea in my head for the first time ever, which was, do I want to win? Because I was like, maybe on my third match of the tournament, and I started to realize, like, oh, like, if I place decently enough in this tournament, I'm gonna have to keep practicing for, like, another week, and then go to regionals. And then if I do well there, I'm gonna have to keep, practicing until states. And I was like, man, I don't want to do that at all. And so while I'm not typically a guy that likes to not give something my best, I was like, do I want to do well in this tournament? And I was like, okay, that's a terrible voice. I hated that voice. But I kind of went into this third or whatever match it was, and this match was like the one that was going to decide if I was going to go to regionals or not. It was like something like, if I won this match, I was going to get like 4th place in the whole tournament. And if I lost, I think I was going to get like 5th or 6th. And I think it was something like 1st through 4th place of the tournament went on to regionals, and everyone below, your season was just over. And so no more practice, nothing. And again, I was in the middle of this match with a guy that was actually pretty decent. Very fast wrestler, but also probably equally matched with me. He just had a lot more energy. And I remember we both had some points on each other, I believe. And I remember thinking, in the middle of a match, which is weird, because really, if you're a wrestler, you don't really think at all in the middle of a match. You just wrestle. You're on autopilot. You're on adrenaline. You just go off muscle memory. I remember thinking in the middle of this match, do I want to win? And I did not like that voice, but at the same time, it kind of was speaking logically. I was like, I really do not want to go on to another week of practice right now. And even if I did, if I went to this regionals tournament, I'm not the wrestler I need to be to do well there. I just have nothing left in my tank at this point. I need to be done here. And so I'm not going to say that I just fell over and let the guy pin me or anything. I don't even think it ended in a pin. I think it was just like a points match. But I will say that there was definitely more that could have been done on that mat. If I was at my best, I definitely could have put some more points on the board, but didn't have it in me. The match was lost. I didn't really feel great about it, but at the same time, I didn't really feel like I'd betrayed myself either. I was like, this is what it is. Like, I'm just done. And it was a painful season. I didn't really want to think much about it, but I had done what I needed to do. I had showed up to all the practices I needed to, and here I was, the 5th place in the county's tournament, and I was like, whew, not going to regionals, or so I thought. One of my coaches actually pulls me aside and says, like, yeah, you could still be an alternate. And I was like, what's an alternate? Well, apparently an alternate is the guy who still continues to practice for that extra week as if he's going to wrestle at regionals, and he still takes the bus to regionals with his teammates, and he weighs in and all that, but he's not wrestling. He's only there in case another wrestler in his weight class misses weight or is sick that day or gets hurt, and so he's like an understudy for wrestling. And this was like the worst possible news to me at this moment. And I didn't really want to believe it right away until it was set in stone. But I think it was either later that day or the next day I got the text from my coach that was confirming that I was, in fact, an alternate for the regionals tournament. And at this point, I kind of did break. I couldn't sustain that numbness anymore and separate myself from the pain. I just felt kind of broken, and I just felt like that 14-year-old again, who didn't want to wrestle and couldn't keep up in practice, and I felt like that kid again who was tearing up in health class. And keep in mind, like, this is dramatic because regionals literally was a week away. I only had 4 more days of practice, and then regionals was on Friday, so it wasn't even a full week of practice either. But it didn't matter. Like, time's a funny thing because, whether or not you're a wrestler, anyone knows, like, 2 minutes can be an eternity, and a year can go by in a flash. Like, it's really relative. And so this week, this 4 days of practice was, for me, an eternity. My body was tired. My mind was tired. My spirit was broken. There was nothing I was going to gain at these last final days of practice. But I had to go. I had built a good reputation with my team. I was a hard worker. Everyone knew that. Despite not being, the best performer this last season. But I was still a hard worker who always showed up and did what he had to do. So when they told me I had these 4 days left, I knew there was no choice. There was no way I was gonna to say I'm not going. I'm gonna quit. There's no way I was gonna leave my team by leaving that bad taste in their mouth. Even though I had no reason to really be there. It was just my duty. It was the right thing to do. But still, I just did not want to go. I remember it was the weekend of that county tournament, and I think it was that Sunday. I went to lunch with one of my 2 best friends. I don't know if he'd want me to say his name or not, so I won't, but I was kind of venting, I guess, all of these gripes, and he was listening like a good friend does, and I was just telling him how, man, I really did not want to go to practice, and I was just so done with wrestling, and I had no motivation to be there, and I knew how silly it all was because it was just 1 week, but I was telling him how much it really felt like to me, and it was nice to just have someone to talk to about it. But we were at a Chinese food spot, and of course I was ordering from the diet menu because I still had to weigh in at the end of that next week. But regardless, we had a Chinese spot, and at the end of our meal, after I'd just been complaining about how I did not want to wrestle and like how crushing it was to me, and of course you get the fortune cookie, and so I cracked it open and received probably the best fortune to this day that I've ever had in my whole life. It said, "A good time for wrapping up old tasks," or something along those lines. A good time for wrapping up old tasks. And I saw that, and man, I knew I was going to get through before that, but I was like, yeah, this is a good time for wrapping up old tasks, because that's what wrestling has become to me at this point in time. It had become clear to me that I was no longer supposed to be there. I had gained what I needed to gain from it. I had proved to myself what I needed to prove to myself. And because my heart still wasn't in it, it never really had been, I was just bleeding myself dry by being there. And I realized that, and God had made it abundantly clear to me, and really drove home the point by assigning me that extra week of practice. And then when I received that fortune cookie, I was like, okay, like, good time for wrapping up old tasks. That's what this is. That's what I'm going to do. It's only 4 days. I've done about 1 million of them before. I got this. And I did. I got through it. I went to regionals, just didn't end up wrestling. I just watched some of my teammates and survived that little mini week of practice. And that was that. That was how I ended my third and final season of high school wrestling as a junior. I ended off, and I really still just felt that weird numb feeling, like really relieved, but also just too tired to like be happy. I just felt so weird. And truthfully, I was, like I said, I had been so tired for so long, physically, spiritually, whatever. I would literally, like, for the rest of that school year almost, but especially for the first couple months, I would come home from school and just like fall into my bed and fall asleep for like 2-3 hours. I was so exhausted. And that, like, I swear I did that like every day for a couple months. And it was a weird, really weird period of my life where I was, I don't know. I mean, it felt good to rest, but I was also just like, man, like, what have I been doing? There was no point of that whole season. I didn't succeed. There was no glory in it. In fact, like, my family and my friends had just watched me, like, wither and lose a lot. And there was nothing to be gained from that except the realization that, like, man, I've just been doing other people's hard work instead of my own hard work, which I know has to do with my creative pursuits, like my music and my writing. So I kind of decided in that moment, like, I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm not going to wrestle again. I'm really grateful for what I've learned from wrestling, but I don't need it anymore. And if I do it again, I'm just going to be hurting myself more. Like, I felt like in that moment, in those final days of the season, that last season, that was really the moral that was being driven home to me. Like, this is what you get if you spend time where you're not supposed to be. And so, I mean, that was only a couple months ago. I mean, 8 months ago at this point. And since then, I've been slowly kind of gaining momentum again in another direction, in the direction of my creative pursuits, in the direction of writing songs and recording some of them, releasing some of them, posting videos, trying to chase the goals that really are substantial to me. It definitely feels different. It definitely feels weird now to not be wrestling because I'm a senior in high school and it's winter time, which is wrestling season, and I'm not out there on the mat. And there's definitely a little bit of FOMO I get where I feel like I'm kind of missing out on some potential, but at the same time I have to remind myself how that felt and how exhausted I was and how my heart was not in it. And sure, I have those kind of tempting trains of thought, like, but what if I didn't diet? What if I was at a healthy weight? Maybe I could come back stronger, have a season like I had my sophomore year. And, those are all very tempting thoughts. But at the end of the day, I think I have realized that I've learned what I need to learn from wrestling. And right now I need to really be gearing up for my real life, which is about to begin. As soon as I graduate, I'm going to be on my own. And I have dreams and I have goals, and they're not going to make themselves happen And wrestling takes a lot of hours. I mean, every weekday, pretty much your whole weekend from November to March. And so, like, that's a huge chunk of my time as a senior, which I need to spend saving money, making music, recording it, whatever. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. So that's the situation I'm in right now. I'm definitely super, super grateful to wrestling. I would not be anywhere near the person I am today, I don't think, without wrestling. I mean, at least not this quickly. I don't think I would have developed the work ethic, especially the physical habits of exercise that really are, like, huge helps to me now, like, hugely meditative to me. And I know it's just a high school sport at the end of the day, but I just wanted to tell that story because for me it was a little more than that. Lots of things I'm proud of within it, lots of good friends I made, lots of fun times I had, bonding. I mean, there's no bond quite like the bonds you make when you kind of suffer through, like, physical pain like that, and endure the workouts that are required. Like, you really end up becoming friends with people you wouldn't otherwise be friends with. And it showed me what it's like to win. And it showed me that in order to win, you have to allow yourself to be a winner. And that sounds, like, stupid or obvious, but, like, there is truly a point where in a wrestling match, you have to decide, I want to ruin this other guy's day. You know, it's not personal, but at the same time, it's so personal. Because you're going to pin this guy. You know, he has a family watching him too. He wants to beat you probably as much as you want to beat him, if not more. You have to forget about him and decide, I want to win. I'm going to do everything I can to win. And I think for a lot of guys, that's not a factor. They just go out there super aggressive. But for me, for whatever reason, I always struggled with aggression. And so that was something that really took me a while to realize. You have to allow yourself to dominate, and you can't hold yourself back. So that, all these things, all these habits and these lessons, I mean, translate hugely into everything else. And just performing in general, I mean, I think that was the thing that I liked most about wrestling during kind of my good periods where I was winning a lot. Was, like, honestly, it wasn't the wrestling itself so much as just going out there and performing and, like, having my team cheering me on, having my parents cheer me on, and for everyone looking at me like I was this thing that I knew I wasn't, but they were telling me I was a champion, and it felt good to kind of pretend to be that, and for them to really see me as that. And I guess at some point I kind of started to become that in my own head. Whatever. The thing I really loved about it was the voices in the arena, the people cheering me on, and the reactions I would get when I did win. And just becoming this thing, like, almost bigger than myself. And what I've realized is, like, yeah, that really had not much to do with the actual wrestling. It just had to do with the performing. And so I think I am a performer at heart. I mean, I love it. I love to have a lot of eyes on me, and I like to do things that are impressive. Like, I want to play good music for people. I want to be a good storyteller. You know, these are the things that are important to me. And yeah, I was kind of touching on them with wrestling, but now I kind of want to get right to the heart of them with playing music and focusing on that, because I spend so much time focused on wrestling, which was really a distraction from my creative work. And so I spent a lot of time not wasting my abilities, but letting them just sit dormant when I could have been expanding upon them. And so now is the time in my life where I'm trying to make up for that and really go all in. And it's funny because when I go to these open mics and stuff now, in the time when I'm waiting to go up on stage, I get that old feeling of waiting for a match to start. I swear it's the same nervous feeling, because that's all it is. It's a performance. That's where I get my thrill, is just in the act of going out in front of a bunch of people and, for better or worse, putting on a show. You might make a fool of yourself. You might really impress them. And it's those stakes that really excite me. And when I do get it right, that I'm just exalted. Like, that's exciting to me. But yeah, wrestling, I think it's a great sport. I think it's a real equalizer. I mean, you can be a big, strong guy and get beat by a little skinny guy. You can be real tough and just decide you're gonna quit. I mean, I think I learned a lot from it. I know I learned a lot from it, and I'm appreciative to it. And I just, yeah, it's time to move on. In fact, it was weird because my little brother is now a freshman in high school and has decided that he is going to take up the gauntlet, follow in his older brother's footsteps, both of his older brothers. And so now he's wrestling, and just today I was at his first tournament, cheering him on. And it was funny to see those same jitters on him before his match. I don't know, it was really weird to be in that wrestling tournament environment. As a spectator, I got excited again, feeling that old team energy of, when are you up, man? Like, what mat are you on? And, good job out there, and like that kind of stuff. And it's definitely an electric vibe in the air, especially this early on in the season. And it was hard for me to kind of just be a spectator, because in anything, I want to be the one that runs up onto the stage, and I want to be the one that takes the mic, and I want to be the center of attention. I mean, just in terms of performing, not like I'm an attention hog or anything, but it was weird to just be a spectator. But at the same time, it was kind of a nice closure almost, in a way, like it was time to pass it forward on to him. So yeah. Anyway, I know I'm surely forgetting some things and leaving some things out, but I think that's the gist of my wrestling story. Please leave me comments if you have questions about things I left out. And I'd be very curious if there's any wrestlers watching, if you guys have similar experiences or even different experiences. Please, I'd be very curious to hear that. So yeah, let me know.